you could press for that specifically. And so I ended up doing that, and he caught wind of one because like G-Man is an attention whore, and at the time he hadn't hit it big just yet with getting all the subs from his multiple appearances. This is kind of early on, and so this was one of the I was one of the first people to kind of engage with him, along with I'm trying to remember the guy's name. His name was not Mister Deity. I think it was one of the people. There is I think Dev Chill around that time, and I'm not sure if he was still with Peach. I know there's a couple now, but there's a lot of people from back in them days that would interact with him or just make just videos and just kind of let him know in the comment section because he loves, I mean, loves that type of attention. Recently, it's kind of changed because he's sort of burnt out. But when you were, I guess, a fledgling atheist back in those days, that's how you got attention towards your channel. You had your own whipping boy, so to speak. And so it's like, oh, okay, have you seen so and so's channel where him and this guy, him and Shock of God are going back. Oh, this guy, him and True Empiricism going back and forth. And so like Gmail, it was a plethora of there's a plethora of channels and people engaging with some of these names that you were at least somewhat familiar with. And so you can see different people's styles of dealing with them, whether they were more adept at dealing with philosophical arguments versus, the strictly theological arguments or, scientific arguments.
All right. So we talk about the fun that you have on the internet, and you seem to really fucking enjoy it. And now, I want to make an observation that I see from the way you handle things, and actually from the way you game, because I remember we played a few games together. I notice you have like and it's fitting that you're a researcher. You have a methodological way of taking these guys apart. Is that something that you developed over time, or is just the natural way that you think?
It does have a lot to do with the way that I think because I tend to compartmentalize a lot of things in my life. And so the way that even in games, um, when I am trying to work together as a team with folks, I'm thinking a few steps ahead of what's happening because I know that there needs to be an end goal. There has to be steps that get me there. But where some people kind of mess up is at that bit in the middle. And what I like to do is to spend an enormous amount of time focusing on that to make sure that when I get to my end goal, it looks like what I want it to look like and not just trash. And so when I'm handling a conversation with G-Man, for instance, I have an idea of what I want at the end of that conversation. Then there's a few options. Do I want him to walk away and go, okay, you know what, Drag, you weren't too bad this time, or I'm blocking you, I hate you, yada yada, or it's just there's a variety of responses that I could want, and it really depends on my mood. So, and I'll give you an example. My recent conversation with G-Man, it was kind of unlike my previous engagements with him where I've been on GTV and I've just kind of called him an idiot. And just I've taken great pains to try and reinforce this idea that, you really don't know what you're talking about, do you? Well, if I want the conversation to end on a really high note, like the one I had recently when we discussed his trouble with Standing for Christ, I will let him do most of the talking because I know that one of the things that disarms G-Man is that you to allow him to overtalk you, allow him to kind of disparage you in certain ways and don't fight back. Just kind of accept some things, even if they may be misrepresentations of your character. Just say, you know what, maybe I could probably be like that. Sure, why not? And you can even say it facetiously because he can't tell the difference. So, if that's kind of what you have to do when you're dealing with them, as opposed to if I'm trying to dismantle him or dismantle true empiricism, I will hang on every word that they say. If they, let's say, I give you a perfect example, if Nephilim Free wants to make an argument from irreducible complexity, and he is placing a huge emphasis on how proteins fold, I will definitely ask him if he understands Anaphysen's experiment, and I have to go quiet for a few minutes.
So one thing that I've noticed about the guys that you take down, quite literally, they have a problem with metaphors, similes, even hyperbole. Is like they don't get that. And I'm not saying, I don't want to be one of those people that says that religious damages your brain. Is it could do, like I have a theory. I have a theory because they're told to believe so much impossible shit at one time. It kind of persuades them for not actually putting effort to understanding this. And it's not just them. It's what I see from a lot of people in the age of more verbal conversations, straight laced, but it seems to hit a lot of religious people a little bit more more acutely.
Yeah, no, that's something that I used to think, and I would attach I would attach certain attributes to uh, individual, I could say, demographics of religious people, and I'll explain it a little bit more. It's I don't think that the religion itself causes them to not understand things or to be, I guess, dumb, just to be a bit inflammatory. I think it's that people who people who lack, I guess, certain higher level thinking skills, they are simply more prone to believe these things, right? Because I think that's honestly what's a more accurate depiction. An example of that is you when you encounter certain Calvinists, the vast majority of Calvinists that you will ever encounter are incredibly narcissistic. And I'm not sitting here to try to, use my armchair psychology. My very subjective impression of Calvinists, by far and large, many of them are very narcissistic. Many of them believe that they are special, and that's actually part of their theology, that they are special, they are chosen. So it's no surprise to me that people who already believe that about themselves have a theology that verifies that in some way. You see what I mean?
And I give you that, and that's why I think we should start a campaign to rescue sarcasm, satire, and um, sarcasm, satire, and fuck, I can't think of the other one. Serious critique and deconstruction, and a humorous side. Parodies, yeah, exactly. So parodies and sarcasm. I think we need to start a campaign across the internet, across the world, to save those concepts. Now, one of the things that I do want to touch on outside of the internet, because you have fun here on the internet, um, you've mentioned several times that one, you were a combat medic in the army, but two, that you are going to school to be a researcher. Now, maybe this is just me worrying about the botanics. Is there a difference between a cancer scientist and a researcher, or is that something that you see a difference between in your mind?
Yeah, so there is a bit of a difference between someone who's a scientist and someone who's a researcher. You can be a scientist and not conduct research. There's people will conflate them, and in some cases, yeah. So to give you an example, if you're a researcher, you are a scientist, but you can be a scientist but not do research. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, I get it.
Okay, so that's what a lot of people, especially, and I've heard this from some of G-Man's friends. Dragnauct's trying to go to school to be an oncologist. Who would, would you listen to him for, if you had cancer? Yeah, so people, so they confuse being a cancer researcher with a PhD with being an oncologist with an MD, and that's actually pretty funny. Pretty funny mix up, but I understand it, right? I understand that if you don't understand the separation between the person who is helping to design the cure versus someone who is trained to recommend it, then it's easy to make that mistake. So you can definitely work within the field of cancer research and be an active researcher, or you can be someone that's just kind of performing very basic tasks in assistance to someone who is doing the actual research.
Now, I'm a layman, so please, these questions may sound ridiculous. So,
Please ask. Don't feel that that's stupid.
so one of my biggest fears with solving the problem of cancer is that gene manipulation. maybe that's a fear of mine because, on principle, I think isn't cancer a mutation of the gene? If we try to do something to try to resolve the issue of cancer through gene manipulation, wouldn't that actually could potentially cause something like the T virus or something that we've seen in science fiction movies of science going bad?
Yeah, there's always that fear. When CRISPR-Cas9 was first being developed, that was one of the initial fears. Is that, well, if you are potentially, editing a certain portion of the gene, that's you're hoping that this structure, let's call it structure, this particular entity, because I struggle on how to depict it to folks who may not understand what it is, but it's called an endonuclease. And what this thing does is that it goes in and it clips pieces of DNA at certain sections. Now, if it's doing that and is using something called a guide RNA to guide where it needs to affix itself, then the question is, well, how do you specify that? Because out of all the pieces, all the segments of genes that exist in the genome, especially for us humans, could it clip something that it's not supposed to? Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely a chance for that. The chances of that and actually impacting us is relatively low. The vast majority of our genome, almost 90%, are non-coding regions that have little to no relevance in uh, what makes us us. So if there's just incredibly long sequences of T T T T T T T T T T T, and it's just hundreds of sequences, and I'm just giving you an example. I don't actually know of a region that's just hundreds and hundreds of T's, but you get the point that I'm making, right? They're not, integral. They're not what's called constitutive genes. And constitutive genes are genes that you need these genes in order for you to be a fully functioning organism. And the chances of that CRISPR-Cas9 editing one of those regions is relatively low because those sequences are unique to them to their own. But what can happen definitely is that, let's say, for instance, and this is something that comes up in bioethics courses, is that let's say we edit a particular mosquito,
Mm-hmm.
and this we edit this mosquito so that we make it sterile in this very very closed environment. That mosquito gets out, it breeds, and it breeds that mutation with the population. Well, that could do one of two things. It could decimate the population and end up killing a cornerstone species of our environment. And a perfect example,
I'm
you
sorry.
wouldn't probably
Let me
want
stop you
dragonfly.
right here, right quick.
Yeah.
So I just because I'm pedantic as hell, if we manipulate a mosquito to be sterile, how does it reproduce the genes?
It doesn't if it's sterile. And so when I mean reproduce to become sterile, that there's a certain it's a certain developmental stage that you can hinder this entity at. So let's say that there's a male that you want to make sterile, and you want it to pass on sterility to kill off the rest of the population. Well, you would allow it to pass off this mutation in its gametes, and so it would end up breeding. But then when the progeny is created, they won't be able to breed.
Wow, that's it's amazing some of the shit that we can do with just manipulating a few genes. Um, Now I'm gonna ask a few topics because I'm gonna let you go. I only promised 30 minutes, and this may take another 10 minutes. So, couple of quick questions, quick fire rounds. I'm gonna start asking about different topics and your opinion of it. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. There was a cartoons in the '90s called Exo Squad. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Wait, say it again.
It was a cartoon in the '90s called Exo Squads.
Exo Squad. I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember that.
So it's where you had like just big robots that were just designed to sell toys, and there were a race of people that were created called Neo Sapiens. What do you think about? Will we ever get to a point where we can actually have designer babies?
Oh, that's already on the horizon. That's actually a lot closer than you realize. There's actually a heated discussion now in certain circles on whether or not we should edit the genomes of kids who will be born of two parents who have the genetic markers for Tay-Sachs disease. And it's when because you sit down and you think about it. Well, if if you have two parents, they both have genes for Tay-Sachs. The likelihood of that child having Tay-Sachs is, pretty high, and that child's going to die a very painful, very slow death. Would it be merciful just to, not to abort that child? Oh well, no, that's a whole nother conundrum. Or could we simply edit the gene while it's still in the blastocyte, the gene, excuse me, the cell that will eventually form all three of your layers for and the other cells in your body. If we can edit that blastocyte very very early on and edit out the gene that will eventually cause the Tay-Sachs disease, well, we're giving this child a shot at life like everyone else. That's a good thing. No one will say that that's a bad thing until you go, well, why stop there? Why do we need to stop at Tay-Sachs? Why can't we go for other diseases, other neuronal diseases? Other like there's a variety of diseases that can simply be edited out very easily, or relatively, I would say very relatively easily in comparison to some of the other things that we do. Where do you draw that line? And I think that's a huge issue right now because we have the capabilities, but it's whether or not we should do it just because we can.
All right, great. Damn, that's a great insightful answer. Let's go to something a little bit more light. Marvel characters or DC characters?
My wife is telling me to go with DC, so I'm going to go with DC.
Hey,
I do like to see. I like the Marvel universe a lot, but I am a pretty big fan of DC.
I will say that I'm a DC. I like some of the characters in DC, although I like Marvel's overall cosmology. Um, One interesting fact: there is actually cancer in Marvel in the main universe, but it is uncurable because they see it as part of the disease. Not even fucking reality manipulators can actually cure cancer because it's part of the person. Fun fact. Now,
That's interesting.
anime. I have a problem with you because you stopped the anime arenas. When are you going to start those back?
I will actually think about starting those up again a little bit later. I need to get back into watching anime. I'm just now watching at 30 something years old. I'm watching for the first time Evangelion, so I need to up my anime game. Definitely, definitely.
Speaking of which, we have. What's your favorite anime coming up when you came up?
When I was coming up, I was a little fanboy of Dragon Ball Z, of course. I remember rushing home from football practice the first time Goku went Super Saiyan.
Favorite character in Dragon Ball? All of it.
Oh, Piccolo.
Haven't you learned Vegeta's the best?
Vegeta can say he's the best, but you know what? Piccolo just has an attitude, and he is the best wingman any Saiyan could ever want.
We can debate on that. I just like Vegeta's. Oh, this goes into it. When you watch media, when you watch any type of, be it live action, anime, regular TV, what is the reason what for you watching it? The fights or the action, the story, or the characters?
Definitely story. I like story and I like characters. I want. Sorry, it's a truck. Character. I'm really big on character development. One of the things I like about Stranger Things is that they do focus a bit on character development. And one of the things that will kill my interest in an anime is that when they try to rush character development.
All right, I give you that. For me, it's been biggest character development and then the story. I feel that it's kind of fair for me to actually say this. Top four favorite anime was when I was growing up: the original Dragon Ball, Tenchi Sailor Moon, and a little bit late Yu Yu Hakusho.
Yu Yu Hakusho is my shit.
Favorite game that you like to play?
That's a good question. I huh because I have to kind of I separate my gaming on PC versus console. I would say Mass Effect series for console, definitely Mass Effect.
You cut out there for us. You cut out.
Oh yeah, for console, definitely Mass Effect. And for when I'm online doing my gaming stuff on my PC, anything fucking Star Wars Galaxy, Star Wars The Old Republic, I still love it.
Battlefront 2 is coming out next week for, well, next month for PlayStation Network, PlayStation Plus. Heads up.
I might check that out. I don't know. I've been kind of disappointed with EA. Wife's shaking her head too, so I'm like, I'll wait and see.
You mean Unichronic Arts buys up companies and eat them for lunch?
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that.
All right. So outside of the great debate shit and having your little playthings and chew toys, what other content did you watch? I was watching a stream. I know you mentioned Naruto Explained with Kryptonian saying that's he's actually pretty fun. Any other people that you watch?
Well, hmm, the stuff that I actually watch outside the great debate nonsense are kind of weird. I will listen to a lot of lo-fi hip hop just as I'm doing lab reports and stuff. But I will listen to Townsend's and Son, and this is a guy who just goes over like 18th and 19th century recipes from early Americas and around the world. I know it's really strange, but there's something about that channel I really do like. Uh, Other than that, I will listen to ASMR videos to get some sleep when I'm actually having trouble sleeping. Other than that, I'm trying to think. I'll watch definitely if I can. Jeremy Wade from his show River Monsters. I'm trying to think of what else do I actually watch.
What about the Grandpa in India? I know you used to watch
Oh
that shit.
yeah, Grandpa Kitchen. Yes, actually there's a Grandma Kitchen now too. Yes, I've not watched Grandpa Kitchen in a while, but I do like to watch him sparingly. I'll say that.
All right. Well, man, I really want to thank you for actually giving me the time to have a conversation. Um, hey, if you ever want to have a conversation with me on your channel, I just basically I'm open, but I'm fucking boring. Anyway, it goes. You get any questions for me? I am an open book for like 2 seconds. 1, 2.
Uh, I'll save it. I'll probably start doing some interviews to get to know folks a little bit better. That's actually a good idea. So I'll probably save it for that.
All right, man. Thank you for coming in, and thank everybody for watching. You guys enjoy the rest of your day, and man, please, guys, start these conversations. It doesn't always have to be a battle. Just learn more about people, and then you can use your knowledge to exploit their weakness. Peace, guys.
Later.